be in the shot, so he's got to be a certain, distance out of the shot. And so he's not going to be there the second you go like this, but it seemed like an eternity. But, they swam down and gave us it certainly expanded our ideas of what we could do, some of us.
It was supposed to be a groundbreaking film, one that would redefine science fiction forever. But behind the scenes, something went horribly wrong. A legendary actor walked away, scarred. A world-famous director pushed everyone to their limits. And what happened underwater was so intense, one of them still refuses to talk about it. So, what really happened on the set of The Abyss? And why did it nearly destroy everything? James Cameron doesn't just make movies, he immerses himself in them, literally. Coming off the massive success of Aliens, he wanted his next project to feel like something no one had ever seen before. So he set his sights on the ocean, a setting that most directors avoided because of the sheer danger, expense, and unpredictability. But that was exactly the point. Cameron wasn't just trying to make The Abyss feel real. He wanted it to be real. Instead of using visual effects or miniatures, he decided the only way to shoot an underwater sci-fi thriller was to actually build a massive, functioning underwater set. His solution? A decommissioned nuclear power plant in South Carolina. It was massive, eerie, and industrial, perfect for what he needed. He had the containment tanks filled with 7.5 million gallons of water and transformed the space into a submerged movie set unlike anything Hollywood had ever attempted. But what sounded groundbreaking on paper quickly became something else entirely in practice. For the actors, it wasn't just a challenging shoot. It became a physical and psychological endurance test. Every day meant hours underwater in heavy diving gear, breathing through regulators, trying to deliver emotional performances while staying alive. Visibility was poor, temperatures dropped quickly, and the over-chlorinated water burned their skin, stripped their hair, and made breathing painful. Communication was nearly impossible. Each shot took hours to prepare. And if something went wrong, help wasn't always close by. The feeling on set wasn't excitement, it was survival. For the crew, it was exhausting. For the cast, it was traumatic. And for Ed Harris, the lead actor, it was only a matter of time before something snapped. But as harsh as things already were, no one was prepared for what would happen next. As the days dragged on, what started as a daring cinematic experiment began to feel like a psychological endurance test. The underwater set, once hailed as a bold innovation, turned into a claustrophobic nightmare. Actors were submerged for hours on end, weighed down by heavy gear, fighting cold temperatures, exhaustion, and anxiety. There was no real sunlight, just the eerie glow of artificial lighting and the sound of water echoing off steel walls. Unlike typical sets, there was no room for shortcuts. The cast had to actually learn to use deep-sea diving equipment and act while breathing through regulators. Scenes were done in real time, underwater, with only short bursts of surface breaks in between. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, the film's leads, were pushed far beyond what most actors would ever agree to endure. Mistakes could be fatal, and they nearly were. Communication was nearly impossible. Because underwater radios often failed, actors had to rely on hand signals or vague visual cues from behind foggy helmets. If something went wrong, help wasn't always immediate, especially with the massive size of the tanks and the technical difficulties that constantly plagued production. Tensions began to rise, the crew was exhausted, tempers flared, cast members grew resentful. Mastrantonio reportedly walked off the set in tears after a camera malfunction forced her to redo a traumatic scene repeatedly, without anyone checking in on her well-being. But no one felt the strain more than Ed Harris. He was in nearly every scene, often the one required to go deepest into the tanks or hold his breath the longest. He had started the film as a professional, calm, focused, respectful. But as the weeks wore on, even he began to fray. What no one knew was that one of the film's most intense scenes would push him past his breaking point and nearly cost him his life. It was meant to be the emotional climax of the movie. Harris's character, Bud, is forced to watch as his estranged wife drowns, then desperately tries to revive her in a brutal CPR sequence. It was a scene full of panic, grief, and raw intensity. And Cameron wanted it to look real. Every breath, every movement, every scream had to be perfect. But the physical demands of the scene made it dangerous. During filming, Harris was required to perform without his diving mask for extended periods, acting in chest-deep water, repeatedly dragging Mastrantonio's limp body through the scene. It was exhausting. What should have been a few takes stretched into a full day. At one point, his air regulator was pulled away too early, and Harris was left underwater, unable to breathe. As he struggled to surface, seconds felt like minutes. He inhaled water. Panic hit, and for a terrifying moment, no one moved to help. The safety divers were too far. The cameras kept rolling. Cameron, obsessed with getting the shot, didn't yell, "Cut." Harris made it to the surface, barely, but the damage was done. He later revealed that as soon as he got out of the tank, he collapsed in his trailer and broke down sobbing. He didn't feel like an actor anymore. He felt like a man who had been pushed to the edge and left there. He reportedly confronted Cameron about the safety risks and the emotional toll the production was taking. But Cameron, known for being demanding and unapologetically intense, showed no signs of slowing down. Harris never forgave him for what happened. In interviews years later, he's described the abyss as one of the most traumatic experiences of his career, and he refuses to talk about it in detail to this day. But the real explosion wasn't just emotional. According to on-set rumors, the tension between Harris and Cameron would eventually cross a line that no one expected. As the production dragged on, the stress turned toxic. What had started as creative friction between director and cast had now escalated into something personal, especially between James Cameron and Ed Harris. Cameron, notorious for his intensity, ran the set with military precision, but to the actors, it often felt like they were trapped in a boot camp run by a man obsessed with control. Every delay, every malfunction, every emotional breakdown was met with the same response: push harder. Cameron reportedly slept only a few hours a night, often working underwater himself, with a camera strapped to his body, directing through a communication system as complicated as the shoot itself. He was underwater more than anyone else, and he expected the same devotion from his actors. But Ed Harris had reached his limit. After narrowly surviving his near drowning, he was physically and emotionally wrecked. And then came the moment that crossed the line. According to on-set sources, Harris confronted Cameron about the unsafe working conditions. The director didn't back down. Words turned into shouting, and then, allegedly, Harris snapped. Reports claim he punched Cameron in the face, something neither man has ever confirmed publicly, but neither has denied outright. It wasn't just Harris who'd had enough. Other cast and crew members began voicing their frustrations too. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio was so emotionally drained after being forced to repeat a CPR scene while soaking wet and half-naked that she reportedly stormed off set screaming, "We are not animals!" What should have been a cinematic triumph was beginning to look like a mutiny. When filming finally wrapped, the damage was done. James Cameron had finished the film he set out to make, but at a cost far beyond budget overruns or technical delays. His relationship with the cast especially Ed Harris, was in ruins. Harris refused to promote the film. No press tours, no interviews, nothing. He distanced himself so completely that fans began to speculate whether something far worse had happened on set. To this day, when The Abyss is mentioned in interviews, Harris changes the subject. When pressed, he calls the experience painful and not something I ever want to revisit. Cameron, for his part, maintained that the grueling production was necessary, a part of pushing boundaries and achieving something revolutionary. And in many ways, he succeeded. The Abyss was a technical marvel, winning an Oscar for Best Visual Effects and breaking ground with digital water simulations that would influence sci-fi for decades. But critically and commercially, it didn't live up to expectations. Audiences were impressed, but not emotionally connected. The film earned a modest return, and much of the buzz focused not on the movie itself, but on the rumors surrounding its brutal production. For many involved, The Abyss became less a movie and more of a ghost, a project that left its mark, but took something from everyone who touched it. And in Harris's case, it took something he's still never fully spoken about. The Abyss may have been a cinematic breakthrough, a technical masterpiece born from raw ambition, but for those who lived through it, the experience left a scar. James Cameron proved he could push filmmaking to new depths, but in doing so, he pushed people to the edge. Ed Harris, a veteran actor known for his composure, was nearly broken by it. And while the film earned accolades for its visuals, its legacy remains haunted by what happened behind the scenes. It raises a question no award can answer. How far is too far in the name of art? Is genius still genius when it leaves people traumatized? Or does the final product justify the pain it took to make it? Ed Harris has chosen silence. Cameron has chosen pride. And the rest of us are left wondering what really happened beneath the surface of The Abyss. One thing's certain, the film may have taken place underwater, but the fallout ran deep.